Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to take a pretty wild journey through time to completely shatter some of our most basic assumptions about international travel. Drawing on the incredible research of Kristen Surak, we're unpacking the history of that tiny little booklet that dictates exactly how we move around the globe, the passport.
Okay, let's dive right into this. When did we actually start using these things? It sounds like a deceptively simple question, right? You probably have a passport sitting in a drawer at home right now, and if you're anything like me, you probably have a minor panic attack whenever you misplace it right before a big trip. We treat it as an undeniable, permanent fact of life. But when exactly did this seemingly mundane, everyday little booklet become an absolute global requirement? Well, it wasn't always this way, and the timeline of how we got here is actually incredibly revealing.
Here is a huge paradigm shift for you. For much of human history, borders were relatively fluid. For the vast majority of our existence as a species, moving from one region to another lacked any real bureaucratic requirements. Just imagine being a merchant or a scholar centuries ago. You could traverse enormous stretches of land, crossing from one empire's territory into another without ever encountering a formal border checkpoint. There were no security lines where you had to take off your shoes, no immigration stamps, absolutely no online forms to fill out in triplicate. For the average ancient traveler, the barriers to entry were purely physical, think mountains and oceans, rather than bureaucratic.
To understand how we got here, we'll be looking at 1. The era of fluid borders. 2. Ancient letters of safe conduct. 3. Han China and Tudor England. 4. The shift to modern bureaucracy. And finally, 5. Challenges for today's travelers.
Section 1. The era of fluid borders. All right, I want you to mentally erase the political map of the world as you know it. We're going to trace these specific, super rare precursors to the passport through 4 distinct eras to see how our modern system was slowly assembled. We begin in ancient Egypt, which gives us some of the earliest recorded traces of rulers offering official protection to travelers. From there, we jump forward to Han China, a massive empire trying to manage its sprawling trade networks. Then we land in Tudor England, an era pretty much defined by political paranoia and the intense monitoring of foreign spies. And finally, we arrive at the modern day, the era of total bureaucratic lockdown. Each of these eras gives us a crucial puzzle piece to explain why international travel works the way it does today.
Moving on to Section 2, Ancient Letters of Safe Conduct.
Now, what's really interesting here is that passports, as we know them, were definitely not the first form of travel documents. If you go way back to ancient Egypt, occasionally travelers carried what were known as letters of safe conduct. Imagine a diplomat or a high-ranking merchant carrying a physical artifact, maybe a clay tablet or a carefully inscribed piece of papyrus bearing the official seal of the pharaoh. These documents were issued directly by rulers, but they weren't designed to keep citizens trapped inside a country. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't about restriction at all. They functioned primarily as a form of royal protection. If you held one of these letters, it was essentially a giant warning sign to local warlords and bandits along your route saying, hey, do not mess with this person, they are under my sovereign protection. It was entirely about physical safety, not border control.
Section 3. Han China and Tudor England.
Now, as empires grew, so did the need for organization. And it's fascinating to look at how 2 vastly different civilizations, separated by immense time and distance, handled the whole concept of outsiders. During the Han Dynasty in China, which ruled from 206 BC to 220 AD, the empire utilized specific travel passes, often in the form of wooden tallies or bamboo slips, to monitor merchants, diplomats, and military personnel moving through critical checkpoints along the Silk Road. Fast forward to 16th century Tudor England, and you literally see the exact same concept. The English Privy Council issued elaborate paper passes, but primarily to keep a very close eye on foreign ambassadors or suspected spies. The focus here was entirely on the other. In both of these eras, travel documents were a highly targeted tool used specifically to monitor foreign visitors. They were absolutely not a universal requirement for an everyday citizen just trying to travel abroad.
Which brings us to Section 4, the shift to modern bureaucracy.
We've looked at these ancient, highly localized anomalies where travel documents were mostly for personal protection or specifically for tracking foreign merchants and spies. But that still leaves us with a massive historical gap. Surak's research poses the ultimate question. So, what changed? How in the world did we dramatically shift the narrative from a world of fluid borders where travel lacked almost any bureaucratic requirement to a world where you absolutely cannot board an international flight with a government-issued microchipped booklet? And this brilliantly illustrates how the journey essentially breaks down into a profound evolution. We started with step 1, a baseline of fluid borders interrupted only occasionally by rare letters of safe conduct. Then step 2, empires began issuing specific travel passes, but mostly just to keep tabs on foreigners. The catalyst for the third and final step, strict, modern bureaucratic requirements for all, was quite simply global conflict, specifically World War I. Suddenly, European nations were plunged into a massive war, and they urgently needed to know exactly who was crossing their borders to maintain national security and prevent espionage. Travel suddenly became heavily restricted. But the fascinating thing is that when the war ended, these temporary, emergency measures never actually went away. Governments realized how useful this level of control was. By the 1920s, the League of Nations stepped in to standardize the size, shape, and layout of the passport booklet, cementing it globally. Travel completely morphed from a fluid, natural human experience into a highly structured, inescapable system.
Section 5. Challenges for today's travelers.
So, travel today inherently requires heavy bureaucratic documentation. Passports are no longer a rare letter of protection requested by a traveling merchant. They're a mandatory, non-negotiable part of the modern global system. And because of this, the system creates entirely new, distinct challenges for travelers. Instead of just worrying about the physical journey, the literal planes, trains, and automobiles, modern travelers must navigate a deeply complex web of administration. Just think about the pure stress of realizing your passport expires in 5 months, and knowing many countries enforce a strict 6-month validity rule. Or the anxiety of navigating online visa portals that seem like they were built in the late 90s, the scheduling of biometric appointments, and the sheer fear of a single typo completely ruining a vacation. We've effectively traded the physical dangers of the ancient road for the administrative headaches of modern border control.
Which leaves us with this thought. Is the heavy bureaucracy of today a permanent fixture, or is it just another passing era in human history? You know, when you realize that for the vast majority of human existence, we roamed a world with fluid borders, it really makes you wonder if our strict modern passport system is here to stay forever, or if it will one day become just another ancient relic. I really hope this context makes you look at that little booklet a bit differently the next time you head to the airport. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.